Jack Harper stared at the lottery ticket in his oil-stained hands, then at the holographic notification floating above his kitchen table. The translucent blue letters spelled out winner in English and 17 other languages he couldn't read. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered, running a hand through his disheveled brown hair. The ancient coffee maker sputtered in the background, filling his farmhouse kitchen with the aroma of cheap coffee and desperation. Bills were scattered across the table, most stamped with final notices in angry red letters. The ticket had been a joke gift from his sister Sarah. "Maybe some alien will buy your corn," she'd said last Christmas. Now it was May, and apparently he'd won an all-expenses-paid trip to some place called Ivlian. His phone rang. Sarah's face appeared on the cracked screen. "Tell me you're watching the news," she practically screamed. "They're announcing the winner of the Intergalactic Tourism Initiative, and I swear I saw your ticket number scroll past." "Yeah, about that." Jack picked up the hologram projector, turning it so Sarah could see. "Know any good travel agents who book flights to other planets?" There was a moment of silence. Then Sarah's ear-piercing squeal made him drop the phone. "Holy shit, Jack! This is huge! Do you know what this means?" He glanced out the window at his withering cornfield. The irrigation system had broken down again, and the bank wouldn't approve another loan. "It means I get a vacation before the bank takes everything." "Don't be such a downer. This is your chance. When was the last time you did anything besides work on that farm?" "Someone has to keep Dad's legacy alive," he said, but the words felt hollow. The truth was, he hadn't been keeping anything alive. The farm was dying, just like everything else in this small town. A sleek black car pulled into his gravel driveway, kicking up dust. Men in sharp suits emerged, carrying briefcases with a logo he recognized from the lottery ticket. "Gotta go, Sarah. The men in black just showed up. Don't you dare make any alien jokes. And Jack, try to have some fun, okay?" The doorbell rang. Jack looked down at his mud-caked boots and oil-stained jeans. "Yeah, fun. I'll add it to my to-do list." When he opened the door, a tall woman with silver hair and skin that seemed to shimmer like mother of pearl extended her hand. "Mr. Harper, I'm Ambassador Reynolds from the Intergalactic Tourism Board. May we come in? We have quite a bit to discuss about your upcoming journey to Ivlian." Jack looked back at his messy kitchen, then at the immaculate officials. "Sure, but watch out for the cat. He's not big on visitors from this planet, let alone others." Ambassador Reynolds' lips twitched. "I assure you, Mr. Harper, we've dealt with far more challenging situations than territorial Earth felines." As they settled around his kitchen table, Jack couldn't help but notice how the ambassadors managed to look completely at ease despite sitting on his mismatched chairs. The coffee maker chose that moment to die with a final, dramatic sputter. "Before we begin," Ambassador Reynolds said, pulling out a tablet that projected a 3D map of what looked like a city made of crystalline light. "Do you have any questions?" Jack watched the holographic city rotate above his bills and past due notices. "Yeah, actually. Does Ivlian have good coffee? Because I think I'm going to need it." Ambassador Reynolds' laugh was surprisingly warm. "Mr. Harper, where you're going, coffee will be the least of your concerns. Now, about your vaccinations against exotic alien bacteria." 3 hours and 17 signatures later, Jack's head spun with information about interstellar protocols, alien customs, and something called quantum displacement sickness. Ambassador Reynolds and her team had left him with a sleek silver suitcase containing what they called essential travel items. "Remember, Mr. Harper," Reynolds had said at the door, "you leave in 3 days. Try not to mention this to too many people. We'd hate to have the paparazzi interfering with your experience." Now alone in his kitchen, Jack opened the suitcase. Inside, he found what looked like a metallic pen, universal translator. A wristwatch that displayed time in multiple dimensions, chronometric stabilizer, and what appeared to be a simple business card that projected detailed holograms of Ivlian when touched. The images showed floating cities of crystal and light, forests that glowed in impossible colors, and marketplaces that defied gravity. It seemed worlds away from his failing farm and mounting debts. His cat Max jumped onto the table and sniffed the translator pen suspiciously. "Don't give me that look," Jack said. "This might be exactly what we need. Maybe I can learn something about advanced farming techniques, or at least forget about this mess for a week." The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Sarah helped him pack, though most of his clothes were deemed inappropriately Earth-centric by the tourism board's guidelines. They sent over a wardrobe of supposedly culturally neutral attire that made him feel like an extra in a sci-fi movie. "You look good," Sarah insisted, adjusting the collar of his new iridescent jacket. "Very intergalactic. I look like a disco ball had a baby with a spacesuit." "Well, maybe that's exactly what alien ladies are into." Jack rolled his eyes. "Yeah, because finding a date is totally my priority right now." The morning of his departure arrived with an unseasonably cool breeze. A vehicle that looked more like a piece of abstract art than a car picked him up at dawn. As they drove past his cornfield, Jack felt a pang of anxiety. He'd arranged for his neighbor, old Bill Johnson, to keep an eye on things, but a week felt like a long time to be away. The car took him to a facility hidden in the mountains, where a group of other lottery winners from around the world had gathered. They were a diverse bunch: a teacher from Japan, a chef from Brazil, a student from Kenya, all looking equally nervous and excited. "Attention, travelers," Ambassador Reynolds' voice cut through the chatter. "Please proceed to the quantum displacement chamber. And remember, whatever you do, don't blink during the transfer. Trust me on this one." The chamber looked like a giant snow globe made of shifting light. As Jack stepped inside with the others, he felt a tingling sensation throughout his body. Displacement in 3, 2, 1. The world dissolved into pure light. Jack's stomach lurched as reality seemed to fold in on itself. For a moment that felt both instantaneous and eternal, he existed everywhere and nowhere at once. Then, with a sensation like breaking through the surface of water, he emerged on another world. Ivlian's triple suns painted the crystalline spires of the arrival terminal in sheets of rainbow light. Through the transparent walls, Jack could see floating gardens drifting between buildings that seemed to be made of solidified starlight. The air smelled like cinnamon and ozone. "Welcome to Ivlian Central Port," announced a melodious voice in perfect English. "Please proceed to customs, and do try not to gawk too obviously. It makes the locals smug." Jack followed the crowd through a series of scanners that seemed to be operated by beings made purely of light. His new translator pen buzzed against his chest, converting the musical language around him into English. "First time off-world?" asked the Japanese teacher. Miyako, he remembered from their brief introduction. "That obvious, huh?" She smiled. "You're still walking like you expect Earth gravity. Relax, the artificial field here is calibrated for multiple species. You won't float away." After clearing customs, they were led to a transport hub that looked like a coral reef made of crystalline light. Vehicles of various shapes and sizes moved in three-dimensional patterns that should have resulted in countless collisions, but somehow never did. "Your accommodation assignments have been transmitted to your chronometric stabilizers," their guide explained. "You'll have today to settle in, and your cultural immersion tours begin tomorrow. Remember, you're here to experience Ivlian as it truly is, not just the tourist attractions." Jack checked his wrist device. He'd been assigned to something called a gravity-neutral residential pod in the market district. The directions appeared as a path of golden light that only he could see, floating in the air before him. Following the guide's instructions, he found a transport pod, a teardrop-shaped vehicle that responded to thought commands. After a few false starts and an embarrassing moment where he accidentally set it to aquatic mode, he managed to direct it toward his destination. The market district was a riot of color and sound. Vendors of various species sold wares that defied description. Food stalls emitted aromas that made his mouth water, despite not being entirely sure what he was smelling. Music that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere filled the air with complex harmonies. As his pod settled onto a landing platform, Jack noticed a commotion at one of the larger stalls. A crowd had gathered around a vendor selling what looked like fruits that changed color as they ripened. The vendor, a violet-skinned woman with startlingly bright eyes, was engaged in what appeared to be a heated argument with a customer 3 times her size. "These prices are an insult," the large being rumbled in a voice that made the crystal walls vibrate. The woman stood her ground, hands on her hips. "My fruits are farm fresh from the floating gardens of Nexus 7. If you want mass-produced syntho fruit, the automated markets are that way." Her translator rendered her words in accented but clear English. Something about her fearless stance and the flash in her eyes caught Jack's attention. Before he could think better of it, he found himself walking toward the stall. The fruit vendor noticed him approaching and flashed a smile that literally sparkled. Her teeth seemed to catch and reflect the light of the triple suns. "Ah, an earthling," she called out. "Perfect timing. Tell this gentleman if you think 7 credits for a genuine Nexus 7 color shift mango is unreasonable." Jack, who had no idea what a credit was worth or what a color shift mango should cost, found himself grinning back. "Well, where I come from, we pay a premium for quality produce. 7 credits sounds like a bargain for something that puts on its own light show." The large customer huffed, but seemed to deflate slightly. "Fine, but I expect them to be perfectly ripe." "Of course," the woman said smoothly, packaging the fruits in what looked like a container made of solidified mist. "They'll be green gold by dinner time and indigo by dessert. Enjoy." As the customer lumbered away, she turned to Jack with a conspirator's grin. "Thanks for the backup. I'm Taria." She extended her hand in a surprisingly Earth-like gesture. "Jack Harper," he replied, taking her hand. Her skin was warm and felt like silk despite the dust that seemed to cover everything in her stall. "And I have no idea what I just helped you sell, but those are the prettiest fruits I've ever seen." Taria laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a summer breeze. "Want to try one? Consider it a thank you for your excellent timing." She selected a fruit that looked like a cross between a peach and a sunset, its skin slowly shifting from rose gold to deep purple. "Just let it dissolve on your tongue, and try not to be alarmed by the temporary telepathic effect." The what now? But she had already placed the fruit in his hand, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Trust me, sometimes the best experiences come from not knowing what to expect." Jack stared at the fruit in his hand, watching colors swirl beneath its translucent skin. "Temporary telepathic effect, huh? You're not just messing with the tourist, are you?" Taria's eyes sparkled. "Only one way to find out." Taking a deep breath, Jack bit into the fruit. Flavors exploded across his tongue. Honey, starlight, if starlight had a taste, and something indefinable that reminded him of summer evenings on the farm. Then the world shifted. For a brief moment, he could sense the thoughts and emotions of everyone in the marketplace. A kaleidoscope of alien minds brushing against his consciousness. Just as quickly as it came, the sensation faded, leaving behind a pleasant buzz and the lingering taste of stardust. "Wow," he managed. "First time with psychic fruit?" Taria grinned, adjusting her dusty apron. "You should see what our vegetables do." "I'm afraid to ask." Jack looked around her stall with new interest. "So all of these are from Nexus 7, was it?" "Most of them. I sourced from a few other floating gardens too." She picked up what looked like a crystalline apple. "This one shows you memories of places you've never been. And these," she gestured to some spiral-shaped pods, "sing when they're perfectly ripe. And here I was proud of my corn crop." Her eyes lit up. "You're a farmer? I should have known. You have that look." "What look?" "Like you understand growing things. Most tourists just see the pretty colors. You're actually interested in how they're cultivated." Jack found himself warming to her enthusiasm. "Yeah, well, farming's in my blood. Though I have to admit, my crops are a lot less exciting. No singing or telepathy involved." "Earth farming fascinates me," Taria said, leaning forward. "All that open soil, real weather, actual seasons. Must be challenging." "You have no idea. Try explaining crop insurance to a bank that's more interested in foreclosure than rainfall patterns." Something flickered in her eyes. "Recognition, maybe? Sounds like bureaucrats are the same across the galaxy." They spent the next hour talking about farming techniques, with Taria explaining how Ivlian's floating gardens use gravitational fields to create optimal growing conditions. Jack found himself taking mental notes, wondering if any of it could be adapted for his struggling farm. "So these anti-gravity pods," he said, examining a cluster of floating planters, "they adjust automatically to maintain the perfect balance of nutrients?" "Exactly. And the crystalline matrix." Taria trailed off, her expression suddenly alert. Looking past Jack, she quickly pulled her scarf higher around her face. A group of what looked like official types in elaborate robes was passing through the market. They moved with an air of authority that made other vendors straighten up and busy themselves with their wares. "Everything okay?" Jack asked, noticing how Taria seemed to shrink into herself. "Fine," she said quickly. "Just some people you don't want to deal with. Market politics, you know?" Before he could respond, a commotion erupted at the neighboring stall. One of the robed officials was berating a vendor over what seemed to be a licensing issue. "Speaking of bureaucrats," Taria muttered, "they've been cracking down lately, making life difficult for small vendors. Can't they do something about it? Form a union or something?" She laughed, but it wasn't her usual musical sound. "Things work differently here. Best to keep your head down and hope they pass you by." Over the next few days, Jack found himself drawn back to Taria's stall. She introduced him to fruits that made him speak in poetry, vegetables that cured homesickness, and berries that temporarily gave him perfect pitch. But more than the exotic produce, he enjoyed their conversations. Taria was quick-witted and curious about Earth, asking detailed questions about everything from weather patterns to social customs. She had a way of making even the most mundane aspects of farming sound fascinating, and her laugh could brighten the entire market. "So you're telling me," she said one afternoon, "that you actually wait for clouds to water your crops? What if they don't show up? That's what irrigation systems are for. When they work." Jack helped her arrange a display of iridescent root vegetables. "Though lately seems like nothing's working right." "Sounds lonely," she said softly, "running a farm by yourself." "It can be. My sister helps when she can, but—" He shrugged. "It's not exactly the exciting life she wants." "And what about you? Is it the life you want?" The question caught him off guard. "I never really thought about wanting something else. It was my dad's farm, and before that, my grandfather's. It's just what we do." Taria was quiet for a moment, absently stroking one of her color-shifting fruits. "Sometimes the paths we're born into aren't the ones we're meant to follow." There was something in her voice, a hint of personal experience that made Jack look at her more closely. Despite her worn clothes and dust-covered appearance, there was an elegance to her movements, a certain poise that seemed at odds with her humble surroundings. Before he could pursue that thought, angry voices erupted from the next row of stalls. A group of larger vendors was confronting a smaller one, their threats clearly audible even without the translator. "You're cutting into our territory," one growled. "Either raise your prices or find another market." Jack started to move toward the confrontation, but Taria grabbed his arm. "Don't," she whispered. "It'll only make things worse. They can't just bully people like that." "Welcome to market politics." Her grip tightened. "Trust me, Jack. Some battles aren't worth fighting." He subsided, but the incident left him troubled. Over the next few days, he noticed more signs of tension in the market. The robed officials made more frequent appearances, always followed by whispered conversations and nervous glances. Smaller vendors like Taria seemed to grow more cautious, some even closing their stalls early. On his last day on Ivlian, Jack arrived at the market to find Taria's stall surrounded by the same group of aggressive vendors he'd seen earlier. She stood her ground, but Jack could see the fear behind her defiant expression. "Final warning," the largest one was saying. "Either you join our collective and play by our rules, or accidents start happening." Something snapped in Jack. Maybe it was the accumulated frustration of watching his own livelihood slip away back home, or maybe it was just seeing Taria threatened. Either way, he found himself striding forward before he could think better of it. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, moving to stand beside Taria. "This doesn't concern you, Earthling," one of the vendors sneered. "Actually, it does." Jack squared his shoulders, channeling his best, dealing with bank manager's voice. "Because I'm pretty sure the Intergalactic Commerce Bureau would be very interested in hearing about market manipulation and threats of violence. In fact," he pulled out his tourist credentials, which suddenly seemed a lot more official looking. "Maybe I should file a report right now." The vendors exchanged uncertain looks. Tourism was big business on Ivlian, and the last thing they needed was an official investigation. "This isn't over," the leader growled, but they backed away. Once they were gone, Taria turned to Jack with wide eyes. "That was either very brave or very stupid. I've been told I specialize in both." He tried to smile, but his heart was still racing. Are you okay? She looked at him for a long moment, something unreadable in her expression. Why did you do that? Because it was right? Because I'm tired of seeing bullies win? He ran a hand through his hair. Because I care about you? The words hung in the air between them. Taria's eyes seemed to glow brighter. And for a moment, Jack thought he saw something shift beneath her dusty exterior. A glimpse of something more regal, more powerful. Then she smiled, and it was just Taria again. The market vendor with the magical fruits and the laugh like starlight. You're leaving tomorrow, she said softly. Come with me. The words were out before he could stop them. Marry me. Help me run the farm. It's not much, but it's better than dealing with this every day. Taria stared at him, her expression unreadable. You don't even know me. I know enough. I know you're kind and smart and braver than you think you are. I know you love growing things and making people happy. And I know that I'd rather face an uncertain future with you than a certain one without you. For what felt like an eternity, she said nothing. Then slowly a smile spread across her face. Not her usual bright grin, but something softer, more mysterious. Yes, she said simply. Yes, yes, I'll marry you. She touched his cheek gently. Though I should warn you, I might not be exactly what you expect. Jack laughed, too happy to worry about what that might mean. After a week of telepathic fruits and singing vegetables, I think I can handle a few surprises. If he had been paying closer attention, he might have noticed how the robed officials suddenly seemed very interested in their corner of the market. He might have seen how Taria's yes sent ripples of whispered conversation through the crowd. He might even have noticed the subtle gleam of recognition in some of the other vendors' eyes. But at that moment, all he could see was Taria's smile. All he could think about was the future they might build together. A future where earth farming techniques met Ivlian innovation, where his struggling farm might become something extraordinary. Little did he know just how extraordinary it would become. The first sign that something was different came during their modest wedding ceremony at the county courthouse. Jack noticed the clerk's hands trembling as she processed their marriage license, her eyes widening when she scanned Taria's identification. Is everything all right? He asked. Oh yes, perfectly fine. You're Mr. Harper. The clerk caught herself shooting a nervous glance at Taria. Congratulations to you both. Such an historic occasion. Back at the farm, life settled into an unusual rhythm. Taria adjusted to Earth with surprising ease, though her methods of farming were anything but conventional. One morning, Jack found her in the cornfield, hands pressed against the soil, speaking in a musical language his translator couldn't catch. The withering stalks suddenly straightened, their leaves turning a vibrant green. Just giving them a pep talk, she said, catching his stunned expression. Plants respond well to encouragement. Uh-huh. And I suppose the fact they're now twice their normal height is just good motivation? Taria dusted off her overalls, a habit she'd kept from her market days despite the clothes being pristine. Your earth crops are quite receptive, though your cow is a bit stubborn. Old Bessie? She's stubborn with everyone. Wait, you can talk to the cow? Of course. All living things have a voice if you know how to listen. She paused, tilting her head. She thinks your milking technique needs work, by the way. Before Jack could respond, a sleek vehicle materialized in his driveway. A man in an expensive suit stepped out, looking comically out of place among the farm equipment. Mr. Harper? The man's smile was too perfect to be real. I'm from the Department of Agriculture. We've decided to approve your loan application. All of them, actually. And perhaps discuss some grants? Jack blinked. The same applications you rejected 3 times? Ah, yes, well. The man's eyes darted to Taria, who was pretending to be very interested in a nearby tractor. Circumstances have evolved. In fact, the secretary would like to visit personally next week. After the man left, Jack turned to his wife. Want to tell me what that was about? Taria became very busy adjusting her scarf. Earth bureaucracy works in mysterious ways? More strange incidents followed. The mayor stopped by to discuss infrastructure improvements for their road. The local bank manager offered them a suspiciously generous line of credit, and somehow their failing irrigation system had been replaced overnight with something that looked more like modern art than farm equipment. "It's just a few upgrades," Taria said when he questioned it. "Basic hydroponics. Nothing special. Basic hydroponics don't usually glow in the dark. Earth technology is so quaint. I mean, different from what I'm used to. I might have made some small improvements." Their conversations often went like this, with Taria deflecting questions about her increasingly obvious otherworldly abilities. Jack noticed how she tensed whenever official vehicles passed by, how she searched the sky at night with an expression that mixed longing and fear. Then came the morning when Jack found her in tears by the mailbox, holding what looked like a letter written in shifting light. "Hey," he said softly, touching her shoulder. "What's wrong?" "They found me," she whispered. I hoped we'd have more time." "Who found you?" The sky answered for her. A fleet of crystalline ships, each the size of a small city, materialized above their farm. Their presence turned the morning sunlight into a cascade of rainbow refractions. "Oh," Jack managed. "Those who—" A beam of light shot down from the largest ship, materializing into a contingent of beings that made Ambassador Reynolds look ordinary. Their armor seemed to be made of living crystal, and their faces bore the same violet undertones as Taria's skin, though theirs was unmarked by market dust. "Your Highness," the leader spoke, dropping to one knee, "the Royal Court of Ivlian demands your immediate return." Jack's brain stuck on one word. "Highness?" Taria stepped forward, and something in her bearing shifted. The simple farmer's wife vanished, replaced by someone who radiated authority despite her earth jeans and work boots. "Captain Vex," she said, her voice carrying a new resonance, "I see my father's patience has finally run out." "Princess Taria," the captain rose, "you've led us on quite a chase, though I must say hiding on a primitive agricultural world was unexpected." "Hey," Jack protested weakly, "we may be primitive, but we're standing right here." The captain's eyes flicked to him, widened, then returned to Taria. "Your Highness, please tell me you haven't married him?" Taria's hand found Jack's. "I have, legal and binding by both Earth and intergalactic law." The crystalline armor actually cracked with the captain's sharp intake of breath. "The heir to the Ivlianian Empire. Married to an Earth farmer? Is that better or worse than the prince they wanted me to marry?" Taria's voice held an edge. "The one who thinks automated farming is the future?" "Your Highness, please, the diplomatic implications alone—" "Would someone," Jack interrupted, "please explain what's going on? Starting with why my wife is apparently a princess?" Taria turned to him, her eyes pleading. "I wanted to tell you, but I needed to know. Needed to be sure." "Sure of what?" "That you loved me for me, not for my title, my wealth, my position. Do you know how rare that is? To find someone who sees past all that?" Jack ran a hand through his hair, mind reeling. "So at the market, those officials. Royal guards searching for me. I'd fled an arranged marriage. A political alliance my father arranged with the Synthetic Farming Confederation. The guys who want to replace real farms with automated ones?" "Exactly." She squeezed his hand. "See? You understand why I couldn't." A new light beam interrupted them, this one materializing into what could only be described as a floating throne room. At its center stood a being who looked like an older, more regal version of Taria. "Father," Taria said quietly. The Emperor of Ivlian, because who else could it be, surveyed the scene before him. His eyes took in the modest farmhouse, the fields of suspiciously healthy corn, and finally Jack. "So," he said, his voice resonating like crystal bells, "this is what my heir has chosen over her royal duties. A primitive farm on a backward world." "Hey now," Jack found himself saying, surprising everyone, including himself. "Our primitive methods have kept humanity fed for thousands of years. And your daughter? She's done more to improve this farm in weeks than I managed in years." The Emperor's eyebrows rose. "You dare address me directly?" "Well, apparently I'm your son-in-law, so—" "Yeah, I dare." A strange sound filled the air. It took Jack a moment to realize the Emperor was laughing. "Interesting," he said, studying Jack more closely. "You're either very brave or very foolish." "That's what I said when we met," Taria interjected. a smile playing at her lips. And yet you married him. I did, Taria lifted her chin. And I won't annul it, no matter what political alliance you've arranged. The Emperor's expression softened slightly. Even if it means giving up your birthright, the throne of Ivlian? I won't have to, Taria's voice rang with conviction, because you're going to see what I see, a chance to bridge our worlds, to combine Earth's traditional farming wisdom with our advanced technology. Think of it, Father. Instead of replacing farms with automation, we could revolutionize agriculture across the galaxy. Jack found himself nodding. We've already improved crop yields by 300% using some of her basic modifications. Imagine what we could do with full cooperation between our worlds. The Emperor stroked his crystalline staff thoughtfully. You speak of cooperation, yet you hid your identity, fled your responsibilities. I ran from an arranged marriage, not my duties, Taria countered. And in doing so, I found a partner who understands both agriculture and innovation. Someone who sees the value in preserving traditional farming while embracing new techniques. And who apparently isn't afraid to argue with an emperor, her father added dryly. To be fair, Jack said, I didn't know you were an emperor when I started arguing. Another strange laugh from the emperor. No, I suppose you didn't. Just as you didn't know you were marrying a princess. Would it have mattered? Taria asked softly, looking at Jack. He thought about their days in the market, their conversations about farming and life, about how she'd helped him see his struggling farm not as a burden, but as an opportunity. Nah, he said finally, though I might have cleaned the house better before you moved in. The tension in the air shifted. The Emperor's guards exchanged glances, and even Captain Vex's crystal armor seemed to relax slightly. Perhaps, the Emperor said slowly, we have been too hasty in pushing for full automation. A demonstration project, combining Earth techniques with Ivlianian technology. Under the supervision of your heir and her Earth husband, Taria suggested innocently. Her father sighed. You always were clever at getting your way. He turned to Jack. And you, Earth farmer, are you prepared for what this means? The responsibilities of being part of the royal family of Ivlian? Jack looked at his farm, no longer failing, but flourishing under Taria's care. He thought about all the other struggling farmers who could benefit from this partnership. Well, he said, I already deal with Earth bureaucrats. How much worse can intergalactic ones be? The Emperor's laugh this time was genuine. Oh, my naive son-in-law, you have no idea. As the diplomatic discussions continued in the impromptu throne room hovering above his cornfield, Jack found moments to catch Taria's eye. Each time he did, she gave him that same mysterious smile he'd fallen for in the market, the one that made her eyes sparkle like distant stars. Later that evening, after the fleet had temporarily withdrawn to orbit, causing quite a stir in town, they sat on the farmhouse porch. The setting sun painted the sky in colors that reminded Jack of Ivlian's marketplace. So, he said, a princess, huh? Taria leaned against him, her familiar scent of exotic fruits and stardust unchanged despite the day's revelations. Are you angry? Confused, definitely. Overwhelmed, absolutely. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders. But angry. Number though, I do have questions. Only a few thousand, I hope. Her attempt at humor couldn't quite hide her nervousness. Let's start with one. He turned to face her. All those days in the market, was any of it real? Or was it just, I don't know, some kind of royal experiment? Taria sat up straight, her eyes flashing with that same defiance he'd seen when she faced down market bullies. Every moment was real. When I fled the arranged marriage, I had no plan beyond escaping the market. It was the first place I felt truly free. No one bowing, no one watching their words. Just me, my fruits, and eventually, you. The tourist who couldn't handle psychic fruit? She laughed, the sound still making his heart skip just like it had that first day. The farmer who saw past the dust in shabby clothes, who talked to me about soil composition and irrigation patterns like they were the most fascinating things in the universe. Well, they are pretty fascinating, he grinned. Though I have to admit, your methods are a bit more advanced than I'm used to. About that, she bit her lip, I might have been holding back. Wait until you see what I can really do with that irrigation system. Is that why the corn's been humming at night? They're happy, and maybe a little excited about their new quantum enhancements. Jack shook his head, marveling at how quickly the impossible had become his new normal. You know, when Sarah gave me that lottery ticket, I thought the craziest thing that could happen was seeing another planet. Instead, instead you married an alien princess who talks to vegetables? Instead, I found someone who loves this farm as much as I do. He took her hand, noting how perfectly it fit in his, even if her methods are a little unconventional. Taria's expression softened. You know, on Ivlian, princesses are trained from birth to be diplomatic, reserved, proper. But here, she gestured at the farm spreading out before them. Here I can get my hands dirty. Literally, I can experiment, create, help things grow. With you, I'm not Princess Taria of the Crystal Throne. I'm just Taria. Well, just Taria, Jack said, pulling her closer. I hope you know this means you're stuck with this primitive earth farmer, royal duties and all. She reached up to touch his face, her fingers leaving traces of warmth where they met his skin. You're not primitive. You're authentically human. Do you know how rare that is in a galaxy full of people trying to be something they're not? Their moment was interrupted by a soft whirring sound. One of the new farm drones, which Jack now realized were actually royal security units in disguise, hovered nearby, projecting what looked like urgent messages in Ivalianian script. Taria sighed. The royal court wants to begin succession planning discussions. Apparently, my father's advisors are having collective anxiety attacks about the heir to the throne living on Earth. Should I be worried about assassination attempts? Because I've got to say, dealing with the bank was stressful enough. Don't worry, she grinned wickedly. I've got the royal guards programmed to protect you, though you might want to warn your sister before she drops by unexpectedly. The defense protocols are a bit enthusiastic. As if on cue, they heard a startled yelp from the barn. Sarah's voice carried across the yard. Jack, why is your tractor floating and scanning me? Speaking of explanations, Jack stood, offering Taria his hand. Ready to tell my sister she's now related to galactic royalty? Taria took his hand, her touch still sending that same thrill through him as it had in the market. Only if you're ready to tell the royal court that their future emperor knows how to milk a cow. Manually milk a cow, he corrected. According to Bessie, my technique still needs work. Her laugh echoed across the farm, making the quantum-enhanced corn sway in response. Above them, the crystalline ships in orbit caught the last rays of sunset, creating a light show that put Earth fireworks to shame. Jack pulled her into a kiss, not caring if the royal guards were watching or if the corn was gossiping about their princess's very unroyal display of affection. In that moment, she wasn't Princess Taria of Ivlian, and he wasn't the Earth farmer who'd accidentally married into galactic royalty. They were just Jack and Taria, standing on their farm at sunset, planning a future that would bridge worlds. Your Highness, Captain Vex's voice crackled through a nearby drone. The Grand Council requests your immediate attention regarding the matter of Earth-Ivlian agricultural integration protocols. Taria pulled back with a sigh. Duty calls. Ready to learn intergalactic politics, farmer? As ready as you were to learn Earth farming. He squeezed her hand. Though maybe we should rescue Sarah from the tractor first? Good point. The last thing we need is a diplomatic incident with my new sister-in-law. Together they walked toward the barn, where Sarah was engaged in a standoff with the overzealous security tractor. Above them, the stars began to appear. Some of them, Jack now knew, were worlds where their agricultural revolution would soon take root. But for now, they had a farm to run, a sister to explain things to, and a galaxy of possibilities ahead of them. The next few weeks brought changes that transformed both the farm and their lives. Royal advisors came and went, their crystalline vehicles becoming a common sight in the rural landscape. Local farmers drove by slowly, trying to make sense of the increasingly otherworldly equipment appearing in Jack's fields. One morning, as Jack supervised the installation of what Taria called a basic atmospheric harmonizer, which looked more like a miniature aurora borealis, a familiar truck pulled up. So, old Bill Johnson said, climbing out of his weathered pickup, married life treating you good? Can't complain, Jack replied, watching as the harmonizer sent waves of rainbow light through his corn. Uh-huh, Bill scratched his chin. Your wife wouldn't happen to know anything about my tomatoes starting to sing opera, would she? Taria chose that moment to appear, literally materializing beside them in a shower of light sparks. She'd stopped hiding her abilities once her identity became known, though she still preferred work boots to royal regalia. Oh, the singing is normal, she said brightly. Wait until they start doing duets with your squash. Bill blinked slowly. You know, when folks said Jack married an alien princess, I thought they were speaking metaphorically. I prefer agriculturally innovative royal spouse, Taria said with a wink. Less dramatic. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of several royal council members, their robes flowing impossibly in the absence of wind. Jack recognized them as the same officials who'd once terrorized market vendors. Your Highness, they bowed to Taria. The Synthetic Farming Confederation demands an audience. They claim breach of contract regarding the previous arrangement. Jack felt Taria tense beside him. The failed arranged marriage still cast a shadow over their happiness. Tell them, she said, her voice carrying that crystalline authority he now knew was her birthright, that the Crown Princess of Ivlian is currently implementing a revolutionary farming initiative that will transform agriculture across the galaxy. If they wish to discuss cooperation rather than automation, we're happy to listen. The council members exchanged glances. And if they don't? Then remind them that my husband's primitive Earth techniques have already doubled crop yields on 3 colony worlds. She smiled sweetly, with minimal quantum interference. After they departed, Bill let out a low whistle. Girl, you are something else. She sure is, Jack agreed, pulling Taria close. Though I'm still not sure what I'm going to tell the EPA about those glowing tomatoes. Don't worry, Taria said. I've already classified them as experimental bioluminescent sustainable energy sources. The paperwork's being processed at several levels of government simultaneously. You're scary good at bureaucracy, you know that? I was trained to rule an empire. She poked him playfully. Managing Earth regulations is like, what's your phrase? Child's play? Later that evening, as they sat reviewing plans for the Earth-Ivlian Agricultural Exchange Program, EIAEP, Jack watched Taria annotating holographic projections with the same enthusiasm she'd once shown selling fruit. Having second thoughts? She asked, catching his look. About you? Never. He gestured at the complex plans floating above them. About becoming the face of interplanetary farming revolution? Maybe a few. She dimmed the holograms, turning to face him fully. Jack Harper, you've already revolutionized my world. Why not help me revolutionize a few more? Your world being the massive empire spanning thousands of planets? No. She took his hand, her violet skin glowing softly in the evening light. My world being this farm, this life we're building. Everything else is just extra farming space. A notification chimed. Another council meeting, another diplomatic crisis, another step in their unlikely journey. But before they answered it, Jack pulled Taria into a kiss that made the quantum-enhanced flowers in her garden burst into spontaneous bloom. Above them, Earth's moon shared the sky with the crystalline ships of the Ivlianian fleet. Below, their transformed farm hummed with the harmony of 2 worlds' technologies. And in between, a princess who'd found freedom in a marketplace, and a farmer who'd found magic in his fields, held on to what mattered most, each other. The royal council could wait a few more minutes. The royal palace of Ivlian made Jack's quantum-enhanced farm look modest by comparison. Crystal spires reached into clouds that shimmered like liquid rainbows, while anti-gravity gardens spiraled around them in impossible geometric patterns. Ready? Taria asked, adjusting his ceremonial robes for the 10th time. She'd insisted on having them made from earth cotton, a statement that had already set the court gossips buzzing. As ready as I'll be for my official presentation as that earth farmer who accidentally married the crown princess. He grinned. Think they'll believe I didn't know who you were? They're still trying to believe I know how to milk a cow. The Grand Hall lived up to its name. Thousands of nobles from across the empire filled the crystalline chamber, their elaborate outfits making Jack's simple robes stand out even more. He recognized representatives from the Synthetic Farming Confederation, their mechanical augmentations gleaming. His Royal Highness, Emperor Zorax of Ivlian. The announcement resonated through the hall. And Her Royal Highness, Crown Princess Taria, with her consort, Jack Harper of Earth. The whispers started immediately as they walked down the central aisle. Jack caught fragments of conversations. A primitive agrarian. Can't even telepathically communicate with his crops. The princess must have been enchanted. Taria squeezed his hand, a reminder that they'd faced worse than royal gossip. The emperor rose from his crystal throne. My subjects, we gather today to formally recognize the union of my daughter with a farmer from Earth and to address the future of agriculture in our empire. Lord Vex, captain of the guard's cousin and leader of the conservative faction, stepped forward. Your Majesty, if I may, while we respect the crown princess's unique choice, surely we must consider the implications. This human knows nothing of our ways, our technologies, our traditions. You're right, Jack said, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. I don't know much about crystal ships or quantum physics, but I do know this. You can't rush a harvest. The hall fell silent. Back on Earth, we learned the hard way what happens when you try to force nature to work on your schedule. Your synthetic farming program promises perfect crops year-round. But at what cost? The soil dies. The natural cycles break down. You get quantity without quality. He turned to face the assembly. You want to know if I'm worthy of your princess? Ask your colony worlds how their yields have doubled since implementing our hybrid farming methods. Ask the farmers at your automated facilities why they're requesting Earth seeds and training. Nonsense, Lord Vex sputtered. Our automated systems are perfect. Perfect? Jack walked over to a nearby garden display, running his hands through the soil. Real soil, imported from colony worlds. Then why can't your machines predict crop failures? Why can't they adapt to unexpected weather patterns? Why can't they feel the difference between soil that's alive and soil that's just dirt? A murmur ran through the crowd. Jack could see some of the younger nobles nodding, particularly those from agricultural worlds. Let me show you something, he said, pulling a handful of seeds from his robe pocket. Taria had insisted he bring them, though he'd thought she was joking. Now he understood why. These are from our farm back on Earth. Regular corn seeds, except for one thing. They've been exposed to both Earth sunlight and Ivlianian quantum fields. He held them up, letting them catch the light. Princess Taria taught me that your people can see energy signatures. So tell me, what do you see? The nobles leaned forward, their eyes widening. The seeds glowed with a complex pattern of earthly vitality and alien energy, perfectly balanced. Impossible, one of the synthetic farming representatives muttered. The integration patterns are stable, Taria finished, stepping forward, because they weren't forced. They were grown with patience, understanding, and respect for both worlds' ways. The emperor leaned forward on his throne, his expression thoughtful. Lord Vex, you speak of tradition. Yet what is our greatest tradition if not adaptation? We were once a single-world species like Earth. We grew beyond those limits, not by rejection our past, but by building upon it. But your Majesty, Vex protested, to allow an Earth farmer to influence imperial policy? Why not? A new voice rang out. A young noble stepped forward, her robes bearing the crest of an agricultural colony. My world has implemented the Harper-Taria methods. Our yields are up, our soil quality is improving, and our farmers are happy. When was the last time you heard of happy farmers under synthetic management? Other voices joined in, colony representatives in agricultural worlds speaking up about their experiences with the hybrid farming program. Jack noticed how the synthetic farming representatives shifted uncomfortably. There is another matter, the emperor said, raising his hand for silence. The question of succession. My daughter and her Earth husband have chosen to make their primary residence on Earth. This caused an uproar. Jack felt Taria's hand tighten in his. How can the heir rule from a primitive world? The crystal throne must remain on Ivlian. This is unprecedented, is it? Taria's voice cut through the chaos. Father, tell them about the early expansion. The emperor smiled. Ah, yes. Few remember. But during our first wave of colonization, the crystal throne was not fixed in one location. It traveled between worlds, allowing the Emperor to understand each planet's needs firsthand. But that was different, Lord Vex insisted. Those were our colonies, not some foreign world. Earth is not foreign to me, Taria declared. It's my home, just as Ivlian is my heritage. And our children will know both worlds, both traditions. She waved her hand, and a hologram appeared in the center of the hall. Their farm, but not as it currently existed. This was a vision of the future. Crystal spires rising alongside traditional barns, quantum fields harmonizing with natural grass, Earth children and Ivlianian youngsters learning together in gardens that bridge both world sciences. This is not just a farm, she continued. It's a blueprint for our future. A proof that progress doesn't require abandoning tradition, that innovation can enhance rather than replace what works. Jack stepped forward. Where I come from, we have a saying, you can judge farmers by their fences. It means the care someone takes with small things shows how they'll handle big ones. Your princess took a failing earth farm and turned it into something extraordinary, not by destroying what was there, but by helping it grow into something new. He turned to face the Emperor. I may be just an earth farmer, but I know this. Whether you're growing crops or governing worlds, the principles are the same. You need strong roots, room to grow, and the wisdom to know when to intervene and when to let nature take its course. The Emperor rose, crystal staff gleaming. Well said, son of Earth. He addressed the assembly. My daughter chose well, not despite this man's farming background, but because of it. The Empire needs someone who understands growth, patience, and the balance between tradition and innovation. He gestured, and the crystal walls of the hall became transparent, revealing the stars beyond. Look out there. Thousands of worlds, each with its own soil, its own challenges. We've tried to solve their problems with machines and automation. Perhaps it's time to try solving them with wisdom instead. Lord Vex stepped forward one last time. But your majesty, the protocols, the traditions, will adapt, the Emperor finished, as they always have. Or would you rather explain to our colony worlds why they should abandon methods that are clearly working? The vote, when it came, was not unanimous, but it was decisive. The Crystal Throne would have 2 seats, one on Ivlian for traditional ceremonies, and one on Earth, where the future Emperor and Empress would oversee the transformation of farming across the galaxy. As the assembly dispersed, Jack heard the young noble from the agricultural colony whisper to her companions, "Did you hear? The princess actually knows how to milk cows." "Manually," another added with something like awe. Later, as their ship approached Earth, Taria leaned against Jack in their private chamber. "Not bad for a simple Earth farmer," she teased. "Well, someone once told me that the best harvests come from honest seeds." He pulled her close. "Though I still think installing a crystal throne in the barn is a bit much. Just wait until you see what I have planned for the corn maze." 5 years later, the Harper Ivlian Interstellar Agricultural Academy sprawled across what had once been Jack's struggling farmland. Crystal towers rose alongside traditional red barns, while quantum-enhanced fields demonstrated the perfect blend of Earth wisdom and alien technology. Jack stood on his porch, still the same creaky wooden steps, though now they overlooked one of the most advanced agricultural research facilities in the galaxy. A group of students passed by, a mix of Earth farmers and alien agriculturists, all deep in discussion about soil composition and quantum harmonics. "Dad! Dad, look what I made!" 4-year-old Luna Harper materialized on the porch in a shower of sparkles, her violet skin glowing with excitement. In her hands, she held what appeared to be a perfectly normal Earth tomato, until it started humming a lullaby. "That's great, sweetie," Jack grinned, ruffling her silver-streaked hair. "Did you use the quantum resonance patterns your mother showed you?" "Uh-huh." And Grandpa Bill helped with the soil mix. She bounced on her toes, making the tomatoes' tune wobble. "Can I show it at the county fair?" "The Interstellar County Fair," Taria corrected, appearing beside them with their infant son, James, in her arms. The baby's skin shifted between human tones and subtle violet. a trait that had given the medical staff quite a surprise. The county fair had been Taria's idea, a way to blend Earth's agricultural traditions with galactic innovation. Now it drew visitors from across the empire, with prizes for everything from best quantum-enhanced pie to most harmonious hybrid crop. "Your mother's right," Jack said, "though maybe warn the judges about the singing this time. Last year's floating pumpkin incident was memorable." "That wasn't my fault," Luna protested. "They just really liked Uncle Vex's anti-grav generator." Captain Vex, now Ambassador Vex, had become a surprisingly frequent visitor to Earth, especially after discovering what he called the rustic charm of square dancing. His attempts to teach formal Ivlianian court dances to the local Farmers Association remained a source of endless entertainment. A familiar truck rumbled up the drive, still stubbornly Earth-powered despite numerous offers of quantum upgrades. Old Bill Johnson climbed out, carrying a basket of what looked like ordinary strawberries, until you noticed they were discussing philosophy with each other. "Brought these for the young princess," he called out. "They're debating existentialism today." Luna ran to greet him, her tomato harmonizing with the philosophical strawberries. Bill had taken to interstellar farming with unexpected enthusiasm, especially after Taria showed him how to telepathically communicate with his orchards. "Bill," Taria smiled, "are you ready for your guest lecture on traditional Earth wisdom in the modern galaxy? Long as they don't expect me to use any of them fancy quantum terms. I just tell them what my granddaddy told me about listening to the land, though he probably didn't mean it quite so literally." A crystalline ship descended gracefully into the visitors' parking area, which still amused Jack, the idea of intergalactic vehicles needing designated parking spaces. Sarah emerged, now Earth's official ambassador to Ivlian, wearing a blend of Earth business suit and alien crystalline accessories. "There's my favorite niece," she called out, then added quickly, "Don't tell the Emperor I said that. He's still convinced Luna's going to choose the Ivlianian throne over Earth farming." "She'll choose both," Taria said confidently, watching their daughter explain the musical properties of her tomato to an increasingly bemused Bill. "Just like we did." The afternoon sun painted everything in gold and crystal rainbows, a normal sight now that Earth's atmosphere had adapted to the presence of Ivlianian technology. In the fields, Earth tractors worked alongside floating quantum harvesters, their operators exchanging farming tips in multiple languages. "Your Majesties," a young aide materialized, looking flustered. "The Synthetic Farming Confederation is requesting an emergency meeting. Something about their automated systems failing to adapt to the new quantum organic hybrid seeds?" Jack and Taria exchanged knowing looks. "Tell them," Jack said, "that farming isn't about controlling nature. It's about working with it. If they're ready to learn that lesson, our doors are open." The aide nodded, then paused. "Also, the telepathic cows are requesting an audience. They have some suggestions about improving the milking parlor's acoustics for their weekly concerts." "Concerts?" Jack raised an eyebrow at his wife. Taria shrugged innocently. "They discovered Earth jazz. Who was I to discourage their artistic aspirations?" As the aide disappeared, Jack pulled Taria close, their children between them. Luna's tomato had started a duet with the strawberries, while baby James giggled, causing tiny quantum sparkles to dance in the air. "You know," Jack said, "when I bought that lottery ticket, I thought the craziest thing that could happen was visiting another planet. And instead you got an alien princess, a galactic farming revolution, and musical produce?" Taria finished, her eyes sparkling with the same mischief that had captured his heart in that dusty market. "I got a family," he corrected. "Everything else is just extra farming space." The sun set, Earth's familiar yellow and Ivlian's crystalline satellites, creating a light show that still drew tourists from across the galaxy. But for the Harpers, it was just another beautiful evening on their farm, where two worlds had grown together into something entirely new. Luna tugged at her father's sleeve. "Dad, can we go check on the quantum corn maze? I think it's ready to start teaching advanced calculus." "Sure thing, sweetie. Just remember what I told you about crop rotation." I know. Even quantum-enhanced fields need rest and regular care." She recited it like a familiar prayer, then added with a grin, Just like imperial duties. Taria laughed, the sound still making Jack's heart skip, just like it had that first day in the market. Come on, family. Let's go see what our maze has learned today. As they walked toward the fields, their shadows stretched long in the multicolored sunset. Jack thought about all the ways love could transform a person, a farm, a world, or even a galaxy. Above them, Earth's moon shared the sky with Ivlian's crystal ships. Below, their farm hummed with the songs of two worlds combined. And in between, a family walked together toward their next adventure, proving that with enough patience, care, and maybe a little quantum enhancement, anything could grow, even happily ever after.